To the lecture series Programming in C. In this lecture, we will be learning about while and do while statements. What are while and do while statements? Those are the looping statements used in C language. What are looping statements? A group of statements that are to be repeated n number of times. Say for instance, if I want to print a message say hello for 5 times. Usually, we will be using the printf statement for printing the message hello. So, I use a printf statement for displaying the message hello on the monitor. In case if I want to print the message hello for 5 times, I need to repeat the statement printf for 5 times. So, this I have to repeat for 5 times in case if I have to print the message hello 5 times. But this will be a very difficult one in case if the number of times increases more. So, in case of this and in order to avoid this, we will be using the looping statements. By using looping statements, we can just brief the printf statement display in a single statement. So, how we will be able to do? We need to know the number of times the loop is to be executed and what is the content the loop has to undergo or work for every iteration. So, there are few looping structures allowed in C language called while, do while and for statement. Say we can go through the looping statements, which is divided into two major parts called body of the loop and control of the loop. Mainly the control of the loop is again divided into two parts called entry control loop and exit control loop. The control statement is used to decide that whether the loop is going to be continued or the loop is going to be terminated. Entry control loop in the sense that at the entry of the looping statement itself, the iteration or the condition for termination will be checked, and then only when the condition is true, it continues with the repetition of the statements. While and for loop comes under entry control loop, whereas do while loop comes under exit control loop. So, in this lecture, we will focus learning more on while and do while statements. The while loop is used to execute a set of statements as long as the condition is evaluated to be true. So, we can see a flow chart wherein the condition will be checked first. If the condition is true, then the set of statements inside the block of the loop gets executed. So, the number of times the while loop is going to be executed, it does not have any determined value. It means that unless the condition is true, it keeps executing the loop. We will not be very sure that how many number of times the loop will be executed, or in other words, what we can understand is that if the condition or if the number of times the loop to be executed is unknown, we can proceed preferring for while statement. We will see one example of while loop. So, in this case we are assuming that the value of I to be 1 and the value of sum to be 0. Here we can see that I is the control variable which is controlling the iterations of the loop. So, I use I less than equal to 10 as the condition for checking whether the loop is to be continued or not. So, initially for the first iteration, the I value will be 1. When the I value is 1, the while condition is checked that whether 1 is less than or equal to 10 in the first iteration. So, if this condition becomes true, then it starts executing the set of statements inside the loop, which is sum plus equal to I. sum is initially 0, which is getting added with the value 1. Henceforth, the sum becomes 1 at the first iteration. Then we will have to increment the control variable to proceed with the next iterations. So, the control variable I is now incremented. So, at the second iteration I value is now checked as 2 less or equal to 10. As the control variable is already incremented, its value is now 2, which is checked against the value 10. So, the condition is again true. So, the looping statement will be executed. Now, already the sum value is 1. So, now it is getting added with the I value, which is 2 now. So, henceforth, the sum value becomes 3 at the second iteration. Then, for the third iteration, the I value is now incremented and becomes 3, which is checked against the value 10. This is again true. So, sum is already 3, which is again now added with 3. So, the sum value becomes 6. Or at the end of 10 iterations, we will be able to make sure that sum value is the sum of the I values or the control variables. So, every time the control variable is getting added with the sum. So, at the end of 10 iterations, we can be sure that the I values are getting added with the sum value. Now, when the I value becomes 10, which is again compared with less than or equal to 10, this is again true. So, up to 10, the while loop will keep going. If the I value becomes 11, we are checking the condition 11 less than or equal to 10, which is now false. If it is false, the set of statements inside the block will not be executed. It comes to the next statement after the block of the loop. So, we will be able to get the while loop executed for 10 iterations and the sum value calculated for 10 iterations at the end of the execution of this while statement. So, it is very simple to use a while statement for repeating n number of times a particular task. We will see one more example. Here the count value is set to be 0 and we are checking for the condition count value less than 2. So, if we see inside the loop, welcome to C, the string is getting displayed and we increment the value count. So, when the condition becomes false, the while loop will be terminated. Now, there is one more example. So, here we can check that this particular example is actually for calculating the salary or pay of an employee or n number of employees. For calculating the salary for n number of employees, we need not have n number of statements or n number of C statements to be repeated. Instead, what the process is to be repeated for n number of employees, henceforth we can have a while loop to check the condition for against the number of employees. So, if the condition becomes true, the process of calculating the salary or the pay will be carried over. So, here we can see the example that count of the employee if it is less than 7. If an organization has the number of employees to be of 7, we can make a while loop to check for the condition that count of the employees less than 7. If it is less than 7, the complete process is getting repeated. So, for every employee the same set of statements will be operated and the pay will be calculated for all 7 employees in a single loop. So, in this particular example, we can say that the number of employee is the control variable which controls the iterations. So, here you can see this is the control variable, which is the one which is responsible for checking the condition, and if the condition becomes true, the set of statements inside the loop will be executed. If it is false, the loop will be terminated. So, we can say that the count underscore EMP is the control variable of this particular while loop. Then what if the condition never fails? The process will result in infinite while loop. So, we can set up a condition, the condition if it is always true, if it is not going to become false, then the loop will be keep running and keep going, henceforth it results in infinite loop. So, we have to terminate the program intentionally in this case. Actually, this can be considered as a type of logical error. There may be some logical error, we may have done error with respect to fixing up the condition or fixing up the incremental value. So, this is one example of infinite while loop. Here we can check that the condition is while 1. So, this is always going to be true because there is no relational operation to evaluate the condition, henceforth it always remains Boolean value 1. So, always it keeps displaying the message hello world in the screen. So, this is what is going to be the output. The output will keep running with the same message hello world. So, it results in infinite loop condition. Yeah, this is one more example of infinite loop. In the first case, we have given the condition which is always true. In the second case, we are checking, we are working out with a expression, relational expression in the condition, but then we failed to update the control variable using either increment or decrement operation. So, here we can see that we are displaying the value of I. So, for the first time when I value is going to be 0, it will display the value of I to be 0. Then it is again moved on to this loop condition. So, here it checks the condition, the I value is still 0. So, it displays the value of I to be 0, again it moves to the same while loop checking for the condition, again the I value is 0, it keeps running. So, here we can see that we have not updated the value of I by using incremental operation. Only then the value of I would be updated or modified. Then if we check the condition with respect to checking against the value 10, which will be meaningful to compute the condition. But here we are not incrementing the value of I, henceforth it will also result in infinite while loop. Then we will move on to the next category, do while statement. So, do while statement is also a while loop statement. There is one small correction or there is one small modification here. Irrespective of the condition, the complete loop will be executed at least once. How we do that? We are executing do statement and we are having n number of statements inside the loop. Then we are checking the condition finally after executing the set of statements of the loop block. So, on checking the condition, now if the condition is true, the loop will be continued. If the condition is false, the loop will be terminated. If the condition is false, the loop will be terminated. But the condition will be checked only at the end of the execution of the loop for the first time. So, for the first time, if the condition is true or false, the body of the loop will be executed. From the second time onwards, the loop will be continued based on the condition value, if it is true or false. So, do while loop can be classified as exit controlled loop, because at the exit point we check the control variable, and if it is true, we are continuing the loop. So, the difference between while and do while loop is that in the case of do while loop, it will be executed at least once. If a condition of a while loop is false initially, the body of the loop will never get executed. Whereas, in the case of do while, even if it is false, the body of the loop will be executed once, and then the while loop will be executed 0 or more number of times, whereas the do while loop will be executed 1 or more times. We will see some examples with respect to do while statement. Okay. So, what happens here? I give the set of statements inside the do block or the loop. So, sum plus equal to I. I am adding the value of I to the variable sum, and then we are reading the value of I using the scanf statement, and then we are checking for the condition if I greater than 0. We are allowing the loop to continue only when I is a positive integer, that is greater than 0. However, irrespective of the degree or the positive or negative value of the value I, the first I value will be added with sum. This is a case. The second case is that we are having a do while loop statement for displaying the feet value. We are reading the feet value using the printf statement, and we are reading the value of it using the scanf statement. Then we are checking if the condition or if the feet value is greater than 2, we are asking the user to enter either a 1 or 2, and this loop will be continued while the feet value is greater than 2. We are asking the user to enter whether the if the feet value is greater than 2, we are asking the user to enter 1 or 2. The loop will be continued only when the feet value is greater than 2. But see to that, for the first time the do while loop will not be checking or will not be bothering about the control variable's value or the condition. Irrespective of the condition, for the first time the complete looping statement or the body of the loop will be executed. And we are here having a do while statement to find the even number input. So, we are using a do statement, we are asking the user to enter a number using scanf statement, and we are continuing the loop. We will also see an example with respect to do while statement. Here in this case, we are asking the user to enter a value or a number using scanf statement. Then we are continuing the loop only when the num mod 2 will give the reminder value to be either 0 or 1. Mod is the reminder operator which will be operated with respect to an integer. So, I get the num value on dividing the num value by 2. What is the reminder that we are getting? That is a condition we are checking. What we are checking? Here in this case, we are checking that num mod 2 value is not equal to 0. It means if the remainder is not equal to 0. If the remainder is equal to 0, we are not allowing the loop to continue. We are checking if the remainder is not equal to 0, we are allowing the loop to continue. So, this loop will repeat if the user inputs are all odd numbers. If there is going to be an even number, the loop will not continue to the next iteration. And there is one more category called sentinel controlled while loop. So, we can set some sentinel values, say for example, in this case let us assume that the sentinel value considered is minus 99. You can give the sentinel values using the hash defined statement. So, this value is going to decide whether we are going to exit the loop or not. So, if the user wish to exit the loop, he can enter the value as minus 99. So, this according to this particular program, minus 99 is considered to be a control value for exiting the loop. So, here we can see a block of statements where we are getting the score value using the scanf statement, and we are checking that score value against the sentinel value. If the sentinel value is entered to be minus 99, then we will not be continuing the loop. So, instead of having checking the value with minus 99, we can have the sentinel value defined using a constant, and this is what is checked here. So, what the compiler does? It replaces the directive, preprocessor directive with value minus 99. So, if it is minus 99, the loop will not be continued. Then in case if it is not equal to sentinel value, it goes ahead with calculating the sum value, comparing, adding the score value every iteration. So, every iteration will allow the user to enter a numerical value, and if we will also see one more category of the while loop called sentinel controlled loop, in which we can set the sentinel value using the hash defined preprocessor directive. So, in this case we are setting the value to be minus 99. It means that this is the sentinel value which allows the loop to get exit in case if the value is going to be checked with minus 99 or the sentinel value. So, how this can be implemented in the form of a loop? So, here we are getting the score value using the scanf statement, and then the score value is compared with the sentinel value, which we have already set to be minus 99. So, if it is minus 99, the loop will not be proceeded or the loop will not be continued. So, here we will be checking with the sentinel value. If it is not equal to sentinel, then we are adding the score with the sum value. So, on every iteration we will keep getting the input from the user, and that input is added with the sum value. For every input, the while loop checks with the sentinel value. If it is equal to sentinel value, then the loop will not be continued. This the sentinel value will decide upon the way to exit the loop. And there is one more way to keep control of the while loop, which is nothing but end of file. fscanf is a function which will allow us to read the data from the file, which is stored in the form of a file. This has a pointer, and that pointer keeps incremented, and when it encounters the end of file, automatically the pointer EOF will be set. It is a special value which indicates the end of file, which is written by fscanf. In this case, we can make use of the while loop to compare the status with the end of file. So, this is how we do. So, we read the contents from the file using fscanf function, and for every fscanf's input we are comparing it with EOF, which is nothing but end of file. So, if it reaches the end of file, automatically the loop gets terminated, or otherwise until it reaches end of file we can keep reading the contents of the file. And as we have already learnt nested if statements, there are also possible of nesting with loops. It means that one complete loop can be a part of the body of loop of the another loop. So, here we will be calling the terms outer loop and inner loop. The inner loop has to completely iterate and should be exiting if the condition becomes false. Only then the outer loop will start its iteration. So, this is how the nesting of loops works. So, we will take one example with respect to nested while loop. Yeah. So, here we have a counter called count 1 which is set to the value 1, and we are using a while loop for checking the value of count 1 whether it is less than or equal to 10. So, this is going to be the outer loop, and inside the loop we are setting one more counter variable count 2 with its value 1, and the inner loop we are checking the condition, we are setting the condition to get executed up to 20 times. So, inside the loop we are displaying the value here. We will see one example with respect to nested while loops. Here we have declared two counter variables, count 1 for the outer loop and count 2 for the inner loop. The condition for the inner loop we are checking as the counter variable 2 has to be executed, the loop has to be executed 20 number of times, and the outer loop we want it to be executed 10 number of times. So, we are here we are printing the message here inside the inner loop. So, the inner loop will be executed 20 times, this loop will be executed 20 times. Also, on exiting the inner loop, the outer loop will be incremented by its counter value, which will again be executed 10 times. So, we can see that here in this case the message here will be displayed 20 into 10 number of times. So, 10 into 20 times, 200 times the message here will be printed. On summarizing this particular lecture, we have learnt on how the looping statements allow us to execute the set of statements repeatedly for n number of times. Very easily we will be able to execute the same set of statements repeatedly. And we have seen the entry control loop and exit control loop, entry control loop while statement and exit control loop do while statement. We have learnt that the do while statement, the body of the loop will be executed at least once irrespective of its condition, and also we have learnt few examples related to while as well as the do while statements. Also in this session we have learnt the use of nested loop statement and how the nested while statement will help us execute the iteration number of iterations according to the set conditions. Thank you so much for listening to this session.